Hi equals, welcome to my YouTube channel. It is fall, or it is almost fall, and it is back to school time. And I want to talk about LGBT kids in schools. If you happen to be new here, I talk about LGBTQ issues, whether it's youth, adults, older adults. We talk about a lot of things, but we're going to do a couple here on kids in schools. If you are not familiar with the acronyms LGBTQ, I will link above my earlier video that kind of runs through all of those words. But just a reminder, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, could be queer. Schools, especially colleges, use a lot of other names. And if you're interested in what some of those mean beyond looking at the video that I did on this, you could ask them in the comments below. Let's talk about LGBTQ kids in schools. Think about your time as a young person in school. What you wanted, most of us, was to belong, was to have friends, was to have a safe environment. You know, whether you liked learning or not, you also wanted to have a learning environment. We know in other situations that kids under stress, kids that are not getting the right food, their brains are thinking about being hungry or being stressed about a situation at home, and they can't learn when that's what's going on in their head, and they're not able to focus. All right, let's talk about the kid who is terrified to go out for recess because they are bullied or harassed on the playground for their real or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity. I mean, kids often don't know these words, but they use other terms. Let's talk about them for a moment. Pussy. They might call somebody a sissy. They might say, you walk like a girl, you throw like a girl. Why aren't you more like the girls, or why aren't you more like the boys? All of these kinds of phrases are young people code for, I identify you as somebody who's different from me. And that often frightens kids. They don't know what to do with that, and so they act in a way that I would consider inappropriate. But not only that, they're often parroting their parents. I once had a parent come into a school I taught for 8 years in junior high. I had a parent come in because their son had used the word pussy towards another child. Nobody had reported this because no adult had seen it, but they wanted to come in, they wanted to make sure that their child didn't get in trouble for using this term. And the father actually said, I want you to know, I am not raising any pussy. And I just looked at him and I said, we do a lot of anti-bullying training, and the kids look at us and they say, yeah, we hear you, and we know that you're telling us this, but the people we look up to the most, our parents, especially our fathers, and our coaches, all use those words. And the father looked at me for a moment and he goes, yeah, you heard me use the word pussy, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. I said, and he's listening to you more than he's ever going to listen to me. Right? And that's why he's using that word, is because you're using it. All right, enough of my rant. But kids are often parroting their parents and how their parents speak. And I know the schools really work at having a culture, and they often have words. Here's our list of the things we value: caring, kindness, respect, all of those kinds of words. Those words do not disappear when we're talking about an LGBTQ kid or a gender non-conforming child. Those words are still valid. Now, I get teachers sometimes, and I've actually had this question when presenting to teachers. What about the students' First Amendment rights to speak their religious beliefs? This one's easy, folks. As a teacher, you can say, you know what? I respect your religious beliefs. But here in school, we treat everybody with kindness, respect. Whatever those words are, use them. You don't have to say that that other child is wrong. You're just saying, here in school, right? You can say, that child can say, I believe that homosexuality is a sin. That's expressing their belief. But when they turn that around and point at little Susie and say, Susie is a sinner, now we have a problem. So they need to treat children, each other, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity, with respect. All right, what about teachers? Same thing. I know sometimes this is difficult. And most young people are still in a questioning phase. They aren't quite sure, what's going on. Although a lot of LGBT and gender nonconforming kids and adults that I've talked to have said they knew early on that something was different about them. Most of the gay men I talked to say they knew sometime before they started kindergarten that something was different. I myself didn't really realize that I was particularly different until somewhere around 11, and then I didn't know what that difference was. I just knew that there was something. And it took me many, many years to figure it out. I dated boys, so I was perceived to be straight, heterosexual as I went through school. So I had some advantage over a lot of other kids because of that privilege of being perceived to be heterosexual. But that's not the case for all kids. So as a teacher, just generally, what can you do? Well, one, you can advocate for good policy in your schools. Schools should have non-discrimination policies for their teachers and staff and students that enumerate out not just even federally or state protected classes, but also those characteristics and traits the school is going to protect against discrimination, harassment, and bullying, which can include sexual orientation and gender identity, along with religion and race and appearance, and ethnic origin and ancestry, etc. All of those kinds of things. The list can be as long as you want the list to be, but it needs to be said. Staff needs to be able to see it. The janitor needs to be able to see it. The kids need to be able to see it. It needs to be posted around the school to be made clear what the expectations are of adults and young people in the building. So what about a child who comes out to you? What do you do with that? Well, first of all, probably they've practiced on somebody else, a fellow student. It might not be as secret as you might think it is, but they're taking a risk. That child is taking a risk coming out to you. Honor that. And you have a commitment not to harm that child. You have no requirement to out that child to anybody else. They told you, and you're the only person that needs to know. You don't need to tell their parent. You could put that child in incredible harm, by doing so. You could, those parents could be rejecting. The child could be subject to abuse. There are a lot of reasons why outing a child to a parent is not a very good idea. And we could actually have policies that could be put in place that formalize that we do not out children to their parents. If they're not out to their parents, there's probably a really good reason why. And we can I'll link my videos around homelessness and oppression and what happens to some LGBT kids whose parents are rejecting. That said, if a child comes out to you in a way that indicates that there is abuse already going on, you are a mandatory reporter as a teacher. You do need to report that. I had this happen to me when I was teaching. A young person came out to me in a piece of writing that they had done, indicating that things between them and their father over the child's perceived sexual orientation had gotten physical and violent. And I did have to report that. That was a case where the parents already knew. I believe they got some counseling and that things improved for that child. I have followed that child through Facebook over time, and the child seems to be a well-adjusted adult who's doing fine. So I'm glad that they got the assistance that they needed. Also, just something else to keep in mind, your students may not actually be LGBT, but their parents might be LGBT. So this is actually my own story. My son, his father and I were divorced, and I had certainly taught my son about words that he shouldn't be using, and of course he shouldn't allow others to use against him. And this was a case where my ex-husband, I totally presumed that he was trying to do the right thing, had told the principal that I was gay. That way the teacher might understand my son's response to a situation. That principal told my son's teacher, and at one point my son came to his teacher and said, these two young people, classmates of his, had called him a fag. So the teacher sat down these two young people, apparently in my son's hearing, and said, "You shouldn't call him that. His mother is a lesbian." You don't out a child's parents either. That's not your job. That situation could have been handled by just saying that fag is not a word that we use here. It is not respectful. It is not kind. You will not use it again. Doesn't matter whether your parents use the term. Here in school, we use language that is respectful of the dignity of people, or however else you want to phrase that. Another thing to be careful of, if you're helping a child and or their parents get some mental health assistance, to be very careful that you're not referring the parents or the child to a conversion therapist. While conversion therapy, at least in Ohio, it's different in different states, while conversion therapy is still legal in Ohio, it is actually against the standards of care, the ethics of all licensed professionals. That said, unless they are reported to their licensing board, the licensing board doesn't necessarily know that they're engaging in conversion therapy, but the community probably does. So be careful. You need to make sure that the therapists who you're referring students to are using affirmative therapy types. Now, this doesn't mean that they are going to say to a child or a parent right away, "Hey, being gay or transgender is amazing. It's fantastic," because therapists meet people where they are. There actually are programs and training for therapists around how to be affirming therapists while also meeting individuals where they are around an issue, and then moving them along slowly to best support the child. Later this week, I will do a video where we'll take up talking about transgender young people, specifically in schools. I'm also going to link GLSEN, the Trevor Project, some other resources around school policy, and including the Ohio School Board Association's website that has a collection of these documents, but places you could go to find good policy. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. Bye, Equals. See you later.